In this series, Grace to Give, this is a message I simply entitled Barriers to Giving. And it can be uncomfortable at times when you talk about finances in church. You've probably heard this, but people will say, don't go to church because all they want is your money. If that's the logic that we lived by, if everything we filtered was through that, that what we should be doing, we should be standing outside of Target saying, don't go to Target. All they want is your money. They don't care about you. Don't go into Starbucks. All they want is your money. Don't go to the Apple store. All they want is your money. They don't care about you, right? What do they care about, right? Their profits, the shareholders. And no matter what, right? You could go to Target today and maybe you're broke and you go in there and you say, I don't have any shampoo. Can you guys help me out? You can't just go in there. I couldn't go in there and take a bottle of shampoo and just walk out of Target. Well, wait, sorry. Actually, maybe I could. This is California, right? I forgot. Sorry, I forgot. All right, if I was back home, I wouldn't be able to grab a bottle of shampoo and walk out of Target. They wouldn't let me do it, right? You guys are so mean. You just care about money. And we kind of put that through the filter when we talk about church. It's like, well, all they want is your money. Don't go there. And the reason why people don't have a problem going to Starbucks and paying $7.59 for a venti pumpkin spice latte is because they see the value in it. Paying $1,000 for an iPhone because they see the value in it. And I think what happens is when it comes to church, we just don't see the value in it. And we come in really with an entitlement, with things of like, well, you should be here to serve me. You should be here to give me this. And if you're here today and this is your first time, you're a guest, don't feel any pressure. I'm glad you're here. You get to kind of hear how we approach finances. But if you call Higher Vision your church, you would say, this is my family. I want to challenge you today. Lean in, open your heart, and hear this. I tell our church all the time, this is what I say. When I invite people over to my house, when I have guests over to my house, I don't expect the guests to wash the dishes, take out the trash, and clean the bathrooms. Why? Because they're guests. You better believe I expect my kids to do that. And you say, why would you expect your kids to do that? Because they're family. There's a responsibility that comes when you're going to live in my house, you're going to help me take out the trash. You're going to live in my house, you're going to clean the bathrooms. And by the way, you're looking at me, maybe you guys all have maids, but we don't, all right? My kids got to clean. They got to help out, and they're family. And I say that to say if Higher Vision is your church, this is your church family, then there's a greater responsibility to get involved, to serve, to give, to be a part of the ministry in making a difference in people's lives. And I would hope that we have that heart that says, I want to be a part of it. You may have heard this many times before, but I'm going to say it again. The gospel is free, but it takes money to preach it. It takes money. It takes finances today to make things happen. It takes finances. It takes money to meet in this building. Isn't that true? It takes money to have the air conditioning pumping in here, to have the lights on. The electric company doesn't come to Pastor Jared and say, hey, you know what? You guys are doing a great job. Just let that bill go this month. We want to just sow into it. No. It takes money. It takes money to have the facility for the children's ministry, to have coffee out there if you want to grab some coffee. To have all of these things, it takes money to make it happen. And I think at times people they just don't get it. They just don't understand when we approach it and to say, look, we got to all partner together to make it happen. And so I want to share this with you, and really a way that I shared with our church last year that I had never talked about giving. I really wanted to break it down and make it clear so we can begin to remove the barriers when it comes to our finances. But before I do that, let me tell you 4 quick things when it comes to finances in the kingdom of God. Number 1, you don't have to give to go to heaven. All right? You don't have to give to go to. You're saved by grace. You're not saved by works. You can't buy your way into heaven. One of our friends who worked at a doctor's office, the doctor, she said, always told her, I'm going to heaven because 15 years ago I bought the church in Oregon. It doesn't work that way. All right? You don't have to give to go to heaven. Number two, you don't have to give to come to church here at Higher Vision. You can come in, you can go out. You can come for the next year and not put a dime in the offering bucket, and you can still come to church. You can sit in these nice plush chairs, enjoy the AC, enjoy the sound system. Nobody's going to come and say, hey, you know what? You haven't given anything for the past 10 months. You can't come in unless you pay the entry fee. No, that's not going to happen, all right? You can attend. Number three, we need to realize with our finances, and when you look at money, God is a generous God. The very nature of God, He's generous. John 3:16. He loved the world. What did He do? He gave His only Son. He gave. God gave so that we could be a part of the kingdom of God. God is generous. And number four, if God is generous, then we should all want to grow in generosity. If we want to be more like God, we should all grow in generosity. 2 Corinthians 9:6. I like this picture that's painted. A farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop. But the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. Although I tell our church we'll take angry money too. And God will generously provide all you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. And when I look at that, it kind of paints that picture. If you plant a little, there's a little harvest, but when you begin to plant bigger, there's a bigger harvest. And as we grow in our faith, we're all in different places. And what I love when the Bible talks about giving, it's not about equal amounts. It's not equal amounts of money, but it's equal amounts of sacrifice. We're all at different places. But we grow in our giving. And discipleship, if we want to be discipled, our finances is part of discipleship. We want to grow when it comes to our finances in discipleship. So when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, what are some of the barriers to giving? I want to talk about that. Number one is just understanding. Understanding. You might be here today and you're like, why should I give? Or how does it work? Or where does the money go? I understand that people are afraid of things they don't understand. And the more we can understand, I think it begins to take down the barriers. And so let me tell you a little bit how church works. I grew up in church. My dad's a pastor. I've been working in ministry now. This year makes 30 years. So I've seen it. And one of the things for us to understand that, yes, the church is a ministry, but the church also needs to be run like a business. I remember talking to somebody about that, and they got very upset when I said that. The church is not a business. And I said, yes, it is. If we don't follow the law, I could go to jail. How many know I don't get to tell the IRS, you leave us alone, we're a ministry? No, there are laws and there are things that have to be followed and be done correctly. And so how does it work? Here at Higher Vision, there is a church board of directors made up of people who are currently or have formerly been in ministry, people of integrity and character. And there's the board of directors. You say, what's the board of directors there for? And the easiest way for me to say it is the board of directors are there to protect your pastor. To protect Pastor Jared, to make sure that whatever decisions that he may be making or things that he's wanting to do, that we're able to filter those things. We want to be there to protect him, to help him, to give advice in decisions that are made. Now, the board of directors, we don't run the church, okay? So, me being on the board here, I'm not going to call any of you up and say, hey, this is Evan, I'm on the board, and I heard you haven't been in church for the last month. Where are you? That's not my job. I'm not going to call staff up and say, hey, no, that's not my job. You have the pastors and you have the staff. And so I like to think of it this way. You have a board of directors, you have a church, and the pastor and the staff is the bridge between the two. Does that make sense? And so how that may work is that maybe Pastor Jared feels that, hey, I have this vision, or we want to do this new thing, and he brings it to the board. And then we begin to discuss it. We begin to bounce off ideas. We begin to see how it could work, and we all get on the same page. He brings it to the board gives it back to him, and then now he can bring it to the staff, and then from the staff it can begin to be shared with the church, and it begin to move forward. So all of these big decisions are there with the covering of the board. And so there is a board. Now you have the pastor, and there's a misperception, I think, that people will think that a pastor can do whatever they want. And again, no, you have a board, and that's what the board is there for. People that might think, well, you know, the church is a pastor's piggy bank. Now, maybe I think there are some churches like that. This is not a church like that, okay? There's accounting here. You guys have audits that are happening. There's financial integrity in the finances here in the church. This church, like ours, is a 501c3. It is a tax-exempt organization. What does that mean? It means that donations that are given to the church does not pay taxes on those things. You also have the benefit when you give to a tax-exempt organization that you get a statement at the beginning of every year saying what you gave, and you can write that off in your taxes, okay? Not every country has that. Thank God we have it in America. I was talking to my friends in Australia. They don't have that. There's not that benefit. But for you today, whether it's you or your business, when you give to the church, when you donate to the church, it is a tax write-off for you, and that's why you may be wondering, why do we got to fill out envelopes? They just want my information. You know, it's like, no, they're able to keep a record so they can give you a statement at the end of the year. If you give online, it's automatically recorded. You get that statement, and again, it's a benefit that you can do. Now, the church doesn't pay taxes on donations, but the church needs to pay taxes if they're selling coffee or t-shirts or all of these other things, that then you will pay taxes on those things, but donations are tax exempt. You can see a couple of designations. The most common when you give is tithes and offerings. Tithes is simply 10%. It's a 10%. I believe that's the biblical standard. It's a great place to be in our giving. They find in studies that it's about 1 out of every 10 people in the church actually tithe 10%. And I think it's amazing when you think about it, how a church operates on 10% of the 10% and what the church is still able to get done. Especially when you compare it to how much the government takes from us and how much is being wasted in so many things. It's amazing what can happen when money is stewarded well. And so you have tithes, the 10%, offerings are anything above and beyond, and that's probably the most two common designations. You also have a kingdom builders designation that covers, covers missions or global outreaches, really things that are outside the normal operation of the church. Now, with tithes and offerings that come in, you say, what do those things do? It covers the normal operation. So again, the building, the lights, electricity, snacks for the kids, paper for the copy machine, pens in the office, all of the things that at times people may not think about, it covers those things. And that's a great thing. It also covers your amazing church staff. How many are thankful for your church staff today? All of those that work so hard, plus the volunteers and everyone else. But when you give, it helps cover the staff, because for a church of this size with multiple campuses, you need full-time staff to get it done. I get this question asked when people find out I'm a pastor at times. They'll say, well, are you paid by the church? And I am. Pastor Jared is too. He has a salary that's approved by the board of directors. He doesn't approve his salary, the board of directors does, and he is compensated for what he does in leading the church, and your giving supports that. 1 Timothy 5:17 says, elders who do their work well should be respected and paid well, especially those who work hard at both preaching and teaching, for the scripture says, you must not muzzle an ox to keep it from eating as it treads out the grain, and in another place, those who work deserve their pay. And so they are compensated. But one other thing I want to clarify is that pastors also tithe and give to the church. All right? Some people, again, I don't know, maybe others don't in some churches, but I know it happens here. I know I do. I've tithed my whole life. There have been some years when my wife and we've been the number one givers in our church because of some real estate things that we've done and other ventures. We were able to give above and beyond. We don't expect people to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. I think that's a great heart that we all want to have as we're part of a church. And I know your pastors are the same way. From the kingdom builders can be given to, you can designate to missions and these things. Designated money goes to what you designate. So if you give, let's say you give to missions, they're not going to take that money and buy coffee. It's going to go to missions. That's when things are designated, you wonder what's the designation. That designated money goes to what you give to. It's just really important for us to realize how church works. How can you give? You got the old-fashioned way. I call it the old-fashioned way, cash and checks. Some of you here have never written a check in your life. And if you haven't, I'm not going to even explain what it is. Go watch it up on YouTube. But you can give. There's a giving box. You can go online. You can give online. You can set it. You can text to give. You can give even when you're not able to make it in church. That's what's so great about online giving. Here's the bottom line. Your financial support, Higher Vision Church family, your financial support here is vital for the church to continue its mission in reaching people, not just here in the valley, but around the world. And the impact that's made through your online and everything else, it's amazing. And you get to be a part of it. You know, we're almost done building our church building. It's been a journey. I'm not even going to get into it, but it hopefully by the end of July. But I've been challenging our church and just saying, and in a nice way, but just challenging, like, give something, be a part of it. I don't want people coming and saying, wow, look at what you did. I want people to come and say, look at what we did. And when you give, when you're part of that, you get to walk in here and say, look at what we did. Well, look what we did. See, in understanding that today, how things work, your giving makes this happen. It makes this happen. It translates into life's change. Here's another barrier to giving. Number 2, it's a lack of gratitude. A lack of gratitude. I love the song that the team sang today. Gratitude. Isn't that an amazing song? You know, we realize is that when our hearts are filled with gratitude, it spurs generosity. You ever had somebody show up at your house at Christmas unexpectedly and they came and dropped off a present? What do most people think? I need to give them something now, right? When they give you something, you don't say like, oh, wow, they gave me this present. I ain't giving them nothing. You don't think that, right? It's like, I want to give them something. It's just a response. When we're grateful, we want to respond in like manner. And I think at times when you look in churches, it's really sad, but you have people that just aren't grateful for the church anymore. They're not grateful for what's happening in their life. Max Lucado said the devil doesn't have to steal anything from you. All he has to do is get you to take things for granted. One of the saddest things that could ever happen here is for you to take Higher Vision for granted. I wrote this down. If we take things for granted, then we begin to feel entitled to it. When we're entitled to it, then we aren't thankful for it. When we take what God has done in our lives for granted, then we stop giving Him thanks. And when we stop giving Him thanks, we start complaining about everything. You know, it's hard to be filled with gratitude and to be a complainer at the same time. You kind of have to make up your mind. Do I want to be grateful or do I want to complain? I read about this study, and this was a non-Christian study. It's a study that happened at a university. There were 300 people in the university that were going to go into counseling that had low mental health, and they were suffering from depression. They took the first 100 of those people, and they said for the next 3 weeks, every day, you are going to write a letter of gratitude to somebody. You're going to write them a letter to just say why you're thankful for them. The second group, the second 100 people, they said you're going to write every day for 3 weeks. You're going to write about your sadness, your feelings, your depression, what you're feeling inside. You're going to write it out. The third group of people, they said, okay, you just don't do nothing. You just go to therapy. So all 3 groups went to therapy. What they found is after 4 weeks that those who wrote letters of gratitude showed significant improvement over the other 2 groups that expressed no gratitude. Only 23% of them even sent the letters out to people. Just writing things down, just expressing it, improved how they felt. 3 months later, they took those 100 people that were expressing gratitude and they gave them money. And they could give it to anyone of their choosing that they were grateful for. So they could go out, if it was maybe a waiter or a barista, somebody they were thankful for, they could actually give them money to appreciate them. And what they found, now I might sound really smart here, but I'm just reading this from the study. They found under an fMRI scanner, whatever it is, that their brain activity was distinct from those who were living in guilt and remorse. In fact, they showed greater neural sensitivity in the medial prefrontal cortex, a brain area associated with learning and decision making. This suggests that people who are more grateful are also more attentive to how they express gratitude. Isn't that interesting? The more grateful they were, the more their brain looked for opportunities to express gratitude and generosity and to bless people. And I'd ask you this question today: are you grateful for your church family? Are you grateful for your marriage? Are you grateful for those in your life, or do you take it for granted? Do you feel entitled? You walk in here and it's like, oh, you guys are here to serve me. You know, people who are truly grateful love to contribute to the mission and the vision of the church. And the reason they're grateful is because they see the value of what the church can add to them. I was just telling somebody last week, our church, I said, Arise Church is at the same time the greatest and the worst church on the island. It just depends who you talk to. We just had a family leave our church after all these years. It just depends. One people, this is not the place. It's a horrible church. And so the next person right there, this is amazing. This is amazing. I'm so glad we're here. It's just our perspective in life. Do you want to be a complainer, or do you want to be grateful? I hope you would choose gratitude. No other organization, no government organization can do what the church does. Heal families, heal marriages, put people on the right path, and give you hope. And as I read that study, I realized, I think sometimes we think people have a generosity problem, and I realized, no, I think people just have a gratitude problem. We're just not grateful for the house that God has planted us in. We're just more grateful for higher vision. More grateful. Your heart will begin to look for opportunities to serve, to get involved, to give, to love on people. Gratitude brings that. Psalms 107:1 says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His faithful love endures forever. Has the Lord redeemed you? Speak out. Tell others He's redeemed you from your enemies." It's just not enough to think about being grateful, right? If your spouse, I don't think that's a great answer if you say, "Well, are you thankful for me?" And you're like, "Yeah, I think about it all the time." That's not what they want to hear. They're like, "Why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me?" It's like my wife has done many of times. We're going to bed, my eyes are closed, my head's on the pillow, and she'll say, "Do you love me?" And I say, "Yeah, I love you." And she'll go, "Why do you love me?" She wants to hear me speak out. I just say this: if you're thankful, express it. Express it through your life. Express it through what you do. And here's the last thing, the final barrier, I just called it the failure to launch. Failure to launch, or a sub-point to that, analysis paralysis. It's just where you think about it so much, you just don't get started in anything. You don't take that step. People who don't know where to start. And you may think today, well, if I can't do anything significant, then I'm not going to do anything at all. If I can't give a big amount, then I'm not going to give anything at all. I've had a couple of people over the years, well-meaning people, beautiful people that have come to me, and they've said, "Hey, Pastor, if I ever had $1 million, I'd give it all to the church." And I appreciate that. I'm like, well, I want to pray that you get $1 million. But in the back of my head, I kind of just think, that's amazing, but how about you start with the $10 bill in your wallet? Get started somewhere. I like my dad's testimony. He was a surf bum, and he went to church with flip-flops and surf shorts, and he said when he started going to church, it was just loose change. Loose change. A couple months later, he brought his friend, George Washington. So George Washington started coming to church, and he said it took about 6 months, but pretty soon Benjamin Franklin was saved too, and he began to grow, and he just got started in your giving. I was reading in the Bible last month, in Genesis 28:20, it talks about Jacob. Jacob made the vow, if God will be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. This memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. Jacob made the decision, I'm going to honor God with the tenth. And people can say, oh, we're not under the law, we don't believe in tithing. Do you know that when Jacob he just made up his mind to do this? This was, they think, between 300 to 500 years before Moses was even born. Before he was even born, before the law was ever established. He just says, I'm going to honor God. He made a decision, I'm going to get started. I'm going to honor God with my finances. I'm going to give him a tenth. He decided at that moment. And I tell you, if our churches were only filled with consumers, could Higher Vision, could Arise Church accomplish the mission that God's given them? And the answer is no. We need people that are not just going to be consumers. We start as consumers, but we need people that are going to be contributors in sowing. Everyone that does their part, people who are part of the family. Part of the family. Again, if you call Higher Vision your church, this is my family, I encourage you to get involved. I think it's sad that you have churches, people that are just doing the bare minimum to get by. Right? People who think, let me do the bare minimum to get into heaven. That's all, just the bare minimum. My youngest son, he's 19 years old. And we just had a guest at our house, so my wife they were staying in his room, set up the air mattress, and he's in our room, so he got some of his stuff in our room. But I had gone upstairs, and I saw in the middle of the floor, just right in the middle of the floor, just this pile of dirty clothes, his clothes. We have a hamper right around the corner, right on the floor. And I'm looking at that, and I am not picking up a grown man's dirty clothes. He is 19 years old. In my book, you're an adult. So some of you parents might think I'm lying, but I promise this is a true story. I asked him to pick it up and clean it up, and he didn't do it. I know your kids listen to you, but they didn't listen to me. I'm not lying, all right? And I asked nicely. Well, I go up like an hour later, it's still there. I ask him again, can you put your clothes away? I'm not going to pick it up. He doesn't do it. I ask him again. He does. So finally, it's 9 o'clock at night. And I'm getting mad. I'm irritated because I am not picking that clothes up. And he's going out to see his friends at 9 o'clock. As he's going out the door, I said, did you pick up your clothes yet? And he kind of mumbles, goes out, runs back in, runs upstairs, gets clothes out. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting downstairs. I'm like, finally. So he's gone. 30 minutes later, I go get ready for bed, and I walk in, and I look where his clothes was. His clothes were here. We have a chair right here. He picked up the clothes there, and he put it on the chair right there, and he left. And I was so annoyed by that, because I just thought, you know what he would probably say? Well, you told me to pick it up. He did the bare minimum. I know I'm picking on him, but it's like when you tell him take out the trash. He carries out the trash. And parents, you know my pain when I see you go 10 minutes later to throw something away and they didn't put a bag in there. Yeah. Oh, yes, I heard that. I'm like, take out the trash, just put a new bag in. And sometimes in church, we're just trying to do the bare minimum, right? Well, you told me to take out the trash. You didn't say put the bag in. You told me pick up my clothes. You didn't say throw it in the hamper. And we come to church and it's just like, well, what's the minimum I can do and still be a part of the family? And I'd say, I would hope today that our hearts are like, I want to do more. It's like Rebecca. I'll water your camels and I'll do more. And I'll do more. And I'll do more. And I want to challenge you today to have a heart that says, I want to do more. And in closing, Pastor Jared talked about this last week, and it's something that we talked about in our church. We introduced a couple of months ago, and it's just simply called the giving ladder. The giving ladder shows really just a progression of the rungs we can climb in our giving, because we're all at different places. We're all at different places, and I get it. And you start at the bottom. The first rung as you climb that ladder is the emerging giver. And maybe you're here, you've never given anything before. And it's just that simple $5, $10. You're doing something. You're getting skin in the game. Maybe there's a special offering for something, kids event. You do something. You get started in that. You're emerging, and that's a great place to be. The second is the percentage giver. Now you were giving, and then now you're like, you know what? I want to make a commitment. Maybe it's 2%. You say, I'm going to commit 2% of my income. What's so great about that? I think it's when we commit, it begins to build our faith. Because now you're committed and things happen, but you're like, I made this commitment. So now there's that tension and you have to decide, am I going to follow through on this or am I going to back off? And so you get started in that second step of just saying, I want to find a percentage and I want to commit to that. And then you get to the third rung, which is the tither, the 10%. Again, what I believe to be the biblical standard. Some will say, well, I don't think tithing's for today. Okay, whatever. If you don't want to call it tithing, but here's the question, what are you doing to grow in your generosity? Because if we're starting here, I hope we're growing in our finances. And so to grow, and just for me personally, I know people have all these different thoughts. I just made a decision years ago, this is what I'm going to believe, this is where we're going to go. And I tell our church that too. Every time I talk about giving, I say, don't email me tomorrow and tell me you don't believe in tithing. It's just, this is what we believe. And I used to tell this to our church, and I used to say, and if you don't agree with it, maybe we're not the church for you. And then somebody came to me like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So now what I tell people, if you don't agree, if you don't like what I said, like it. All right. It's pretty good, right? It's like, just you don't have to leave. Just like it. Just start liking it. All right. That's for our church. Some of you are quiet, like this guy got attitude. I'm not here next Sunday. Pastor Jared will be back. Come back. All right. Here's the fourth. After that, committing to the 10%, you got the next one. It's just called the extravagant giver. When you approach God with the question, God, what do you want me to give above and beyond the 10%? My wife and I, we've done this many of times. In fact, we do it every month. It's above and beyond. Extravagant giving. It could be special offerings, our building fund, things you're doing here in your church. I think of the woman who brought the perfume, that 1 year's of salary, she broke it at the feet of Jesus. What did she do? She gave extravagantly. We all should have moments in our life when we give extravagantly. And then finally, the fifth one, I want to get to this place. It's when you go to God and you don't say, God, how much should I give? It's, God, how much do you want me to keep? Tell me what to keep and I'm going to give the rest away. A surrendered giver. I think often as Christians, we'll go, God, everything I have belongs to you. My whole life belongs to you, except my money. And accept that unforgiveness I have towards Sarah, because you know what she did to me. But everything else belongs to you. And here's what I want to tell you. It either all belongs to God or it doesn't. It either all belongs to Him or it doesn't. And so many people are resistant to giving. And I think there are people, I know it happens in our church, they may complain about the church or the pastor to justify their reasons for not giving. People who don't want to tithe, or people who say it's not for today. And if you don't want to tithe, don't tithe. It's fine. You can keep coming to church. But here's the question I'd have is this. What are you doing to grow in your generosity? If we're supposed to be disciples, we're supposed to be growing in every area of our life. If God is generous, what are you doing? What am I doing to grow in generosity? Are we growing, or are we just content in using arguments to mask our inactivity and our lack of growth? Talking about everything else to distract from us not doing anything to grow. I found in church that usually the people that complain the most are the ones doing the least. And the people that are doing the most are busy doing the most. They're invested, they aren't complaining, they're serving over and above, they're willing to do whatever it takes to reach people for Jesus Christ. And I hope today that here, Higher Vision, that you make up your mind that I want to be a person of gratitude. I want to be doing the most. I want to be involved. I want to do whatever I can to help my church family grow, help my church reach people who maybe don't know Jesus. I want to do whatever it takes to give the person walking through the door the opportunity I had when I first came to church, to sit in a seat and to be ministered to, a seat that somebody else bought, a building somebody else paid for. I got to come in and hear, and my life was transformed. I want to do that for somebody else. I tell you, when we have that heart, you can't stop the church from reaching people for Jesus. So let me ask you this question. What are you willing to do to climb to the next rung on that ladder? Close your eyes with me today. As I shared the ladder, maybe you realize this is where I am, and there's no judgment. Wherever you are is where you are. But I'd ask you to identify, where are you on that? Is it the first? Is it the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth? And wherever you are, the second question is, what are you doing to grow to the next level? What are you doing to grow in your generosity? What steps do you maybe need to take so that you can stretch your faith to grow more? So God, I thank you for speaking to our hearts, every person here. And we're all on this journey. I'm on this journey. I want to keep growing, not just in generosity, but growing in love, growing in forgiveness, growing in long-suffering and self-control. God, we just want to grow in every area in our life. God, you've graced us to give. So Lord, I pray that our hearts, they will be stirred to dream for more, to believe for more. Maybe there'll be some people here today that have been coming to the church for a while. This today might be the first time they're going to take that step of faith and just put something in. They're just going to get started. They're going to launch. They're not going to keep analyzing. They're going to launch. Begin to be invested in what you're doing here. So God, stir our faith. Help us to believe you for more. In Jesus' name.